Fox 8 takes you inside the Atlanta home where police found Derrick Groves with exclusive video of the crawl space police say he was hiding in. Groves' arrest yesterday ended a nearly 5-month manhunt for the last of the 10 inmates who escaped the Orleans jail.
It's a regular morning at the Orleans Parish Justice Center in New Orleans, May 16, 2025. Guards are doing their routine head count at 8:30 a.m. when they notice something's wrong. 10 cells are empty. But that's not even the wildest part. On the bathroom wall, scrawled in big letters, someone had written, "To ease yellow," with a smiley face and an arrow pointing to a gaping hole in the wall. 10 convicted killers had just pulled off one of the biggest jailbreaks in Louisiana history, and they left a taunting message behind like it was some kind of joke. But before we get into how this whole thing unraveled, if you're loving these deep dives into the darkest true crime cases, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and ring that bell so you never miss a story here on Mystoracrimes. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this one. Now, let me take you back to where this nightmare really began. February 13th, 2018, Mardi Gras Day in New Orleans. Everyone's celebrating, music's blaring. People are having a good time. It's around 8 p.m. in the lower 9th Ward on St. Claude Avenue. A red Nissan Altima is parked outside a house with 5 people inside, just hanging out at what was supposed to be a family gathering. Then suddenly, gunfire erupts. Not just a couple shots. We're talking about AK-47 style assault rifles lighting up the night. When the smoke cleared, 2 young men were dead. Jamar Robinson, 26 years old, and Byron Jackson, just 21. 3 others were wounded but survived. Imagine being at a family gathering on Mardi Gras, and suddenly your whole world is shattered by bullets tearing through everything around you. Now here's what makes this even more twisted. The shooters weren't even after most of these people. Investigators believe the real target was a guy named Richard Green, a heroin dealer, who was at that gathering. Word on the street was that a rival dealer thought Green had killed his son months earlier, so he allegedly hired hitmen to take Green out. But Green survived without a scratch. 2 innocent people died instead, and 3 others were shot, all because of some drug beef that had nothing to do with them. The shooters? 2 men named Derrick Groves and Kendall Barnes. And here's something that'll send chills down your spine about Derrick Groves. This man was born into tragedy. His grandmother, Kim Groves, was murdered back in 1994, shot to death outside her home in the lower 9th Ward. But she wasn't killed by some random criminal. She was killed on the orders of a corrupt New Orleans police officer named Len Davis because she had filed a brutality complaint against him. Think about that for a second. A cop ordered a hit on a woman for reporting him. Davis got the death penalty for it, though President Biden would later commute that sentence to life in prison in December 2024. Derrick was born almost 3 years after his grandmother's murder, growing up in the shadow of that violence. Some people might say he never had a chance, but does trauma excuse what comes next? We'll let you decide. After the 2018 shooting, police started building their case. Kendall Barnes was arrested in May 2018, but Groves? He stayed on the run until January 2019, when the FBI's Violent Crime Task Force finally caught him in Slidell early one morning. By then, a grand jury had already indicted both men on 7 counts, each including 2 counts of second-degree murder, 3 counts of attempted second-degree murder, and obstruction of justice charges. The evidence against Groves seemed pretty damning. Prosecutors had cooperating witnesses, including Richard Green himself, the intended target who agreed to testify. They also had Derrick Robinson, another guy involved in the scene. Now here's the thing. Both these witnesses were facing their own federal gun and drug charges, and they were testifying in hopes of getting lighter sentences. So you have to wonder, how reliable are witnesses who have everything to gain from helping prosecution? But prosecutors had more than just witness testimony. They presented an Instagram video that Groves had posted. He claimed he was just playing a track from rapper NBA Youngboy. Nothing more. But even Barnes' own girlfriend was texting him begging him to take the video down because of how bad it looked. When you're accused of shooting and you're posting videos that could be seen as taunting, that's not a good look. The trial happened in 2019, and a jury convicted Groves. But here's where things get complicated. The verdict was 10-2. 10 jurors said guilty, 2 said not guilty. Back then, Louisiana allowed non-unanimous jury verdicts in felony cases. But then the Supreme Court ruled that these split verdicts were unconstitutional. So Groves got a new trial. Meanwhile, in 2021, federal judge Greg Guidry sentenced Groves to nearly 12 years in prison for possession of heroin and fentanyl with intent to distribute, plus illegal possession of a firearm. The federal government basically loaned him to Louisiana, so the state could pursue their murder case against him. So he's already serving federal time while fighting these murder charges. The retrials in 2023 were a mess. The first one ended in a mistrial. The second one had a deadlocked jury. Can you imagine being a family member of Jamar Robinson or Byron Jackson, sitting through trial after trial, reliving that nightmare over and over, and the jury can't even reach a verdict? But finally, on October 18th, 2024, a unanimous jury found Derrick Groves guilty on 2 charges of second-degree murder and 2 charges of attempted second-degree murder. This time it stuck. He was looking at mandatory life in prison. He'd also pleaded guilty to 2 counts of manslaughter in separate cases. This man was connected to at least 2 other homicides in the 9th Ward, one in 2017 and another in 2019. Derrick Groves wasn't just a one-time offender. This was a pattern. So there he is, sitting in Orleans Parish Justice Center, waiting for his official sentencing hearing, knowing he's never getting out. And that's when things get absolutely crazy. 2 days before the escape, Groves video called his girlfriend, Dariana Burton, on a jail-issued iPad. Now, these calls are monitored, so they were being careful, speaking in vague terms. She helped him connect with some unidentified man, and they seemed to be coordinating communication on other lines that weren't being watched. The planning was already in motion. Early morning hours of May 16th, 2025, 10 inmates, ranging from teenagers to guys in their early 40s, executed their plan. They somehow pulled a jail cell door completely off its tracks. Let that sink in. They physically ripped the door off. Then they went to an empty handicap cell and removed the entire toilet. Underneath was their way out, a hole in the wall. They crawled through that hole, scaled a fence, and crossed Interstate 10. Just like that, they were gone. But remember that taunting message? To easy LOL with a smiley face. These guys were so confident they'd get away that they literally left a note bragging about it. It wasn't discovered until the 8:30 a.m. head count, hours after they'd already fled. They had a serious head start. Now, you might be wondering, how does this even happen at a relatively new jail facility? Well, a maintenance worker named Sterling Williams, 33 years old, was arrested for allegedly helping them. Prosecutors said he turned off the water supply so the inmates could remove that toilet. His lawyer denied it, saying he'd only turn off the water because the toilet in that unused cell was clogged. But the timing was awfully convenient, wasn't it? Within hours of discovering the escape, 3 inmates were recaptured right there in New Orleans. Kendall Miles, Robert Moody, and Ken and Dennis didn't get very far. 10 days later, 3 more were caught. Jermaine Donald and Leo Tate were arrested in Texas. Lenton Van Buren was grabbed in Baton Rouge. By the end of May, Gary Price and Corey Boyd were also back in custody. 6 weeks after the jailbreak, in late June, Antoine Massey was apprehended at a New Orleans home. That's 9 out of 10. 9 inmates caught within 6 weeks. But Derrick Groves? He vanished like smoke. 5 months went by. 5 months where he was just gone. And let me tell you who was terrified during those 5 months. 2 family members of Jamar Robinson, one of the murder victims, had to go into hiding. They'd just celebrated Jamar's birthday at his gravesite 2 days before learning Groves had escaped. The Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office never even contacted them to warn them. They found out on their own, and no PD officers had to escort them home to pack and pick up their children from school before they fled the city. Can you imagine living in that fear? Your family member's killer escapes, and you have to abandon your whole life because you don't know if he's coming for you? It wasn't just the victims' families who were scared. Several attorneys who'd been involved in Groves' criminal trial left the state with their families, saying they feared for their safety. This man had that much reach, That much intimidation factor. That lawyers were fleeing Louisiana. Governor Jeff Landry called it the largest jailbreak in the history of the state and ordered investigations into the entire New Orleans criminal justice system. Orleans Parish Sheriff Susan Hudson took responsibility but blamed lack of resources, faulty locks, and staffing shortages. Meanwhile, more than a dozen people were arrested for allegedly helping the escapees, including Groves' girlfriend Dariana Burton, who used to work at the jail. She had active involvement in planning the escape, relaying information, coordinating communications. A judge set her bond at $2.5 million. But where was Groves? For 5 long months, nobody knew. Then in early October 2025, Louisiana State Police got information that he might be in the Atlanta area. They traced him through search warrants and investigative work to a specific house on Honeysuckle Lane in southwest Atlanta. Tips to Crime Stoppers had led them there. On Wednesday afternoon, October 8, 2025, a coordinated operation went down. U.S. Marshals Southeast Regional Fugitive Task Force and Atlanta Police Department SWAT teams surrounded the house. They deployed gas into the home. Once, twice, multiple times. Nothing. It took almost 3 hours and several rounds of gas before AK-9 unit finally located him hiding in a crawl space in the basement. Derrick Groves, the ringleader of the biggest jailbreak in Louisiana history, was finally caught. He was alone in the house and was taken into custody without incident after all that. The next day, October 9th, Groves appeared in magistrate court in Fulton County. The judge asked him about extradition, and you know what he said? He said, "I want to return to where I'm from." Just like that. No fight, no resistance. He waived his right to an extradition hearing, giving Louisiana law enforcement 15 days to come pick him up from Fulton County Jail. After 5 months on the run, after all that effort to escape, he just gave up and said, "Take me back." Now he's facing not just his original life sentences for murders, but also new charges for simple escape. Authorities were considering upgrading those to aggravated escape because of drugs and weapons found in that Atlanta home. Louisiana Attorney General Liz Murrow said he's got a lot to answer for to both Louisiana and Georgia, and that the manhunt was expensive and terrifying for everyone involved. Orleans Parish District Attorney Jason Williams called Groves' escape a serious breach of public safety and a historic failure of custodial security. He said they'd investigate everyone who helped Groves get to Atlanta because he obviously didn't do it alone. The FBI special agent who worked the case said after Groves' 2024 conviction that his days of bullying and brutalizing the community were over, that the message should be crystal clear to anyone choosing violence. But was that message really clear when he escaped 6 months later and stayed free for 5 months? Groves will eventually join the other 9 escapees at Louisiana State Penitentiary in Angola, one of the most notorious maximum security prisons in America. He'll be arraigned on the escape charges and sentenced for the murders he was convicted of. Mandatory life without parole. He's never getting out. So here's what I want you to think about. What goes through someone's mind when they're looking at life in prison and they see an opportunity to escape? Is it pure desperation or is it arrogance? Derrick Groves left that taunting message on the wall like this was all a game. But was he running toward freedom or just running from the inevitable? And what about the system that let 10 convicted criminals just walk out? How does a relatively new jail facility have doors that can be ripped off and walls with holes behind toilets? But here's the deeper question. Derrick Groves was born into a legacy of violence. His grandmother was murdered by a corrupt cop. He grew up in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in New Orleans. Does that background explain his path? Or are we all responsible for the choices we make regardless of where we come from? Can trauma be both real and not an excuse at the same time? If this story got you thinking, I need you to hit that like button right now. Subscribe to Mystoracrimes if you haven't already, and drop a comment telling me what you think. Should the people who helped him escape face the same consequences he does? Let's talk about it, and I'll see you in the next one.